Hey everyone! I was getting a lot of questions about how to sew the ties onto the masks, so I thought I would make this quick video. It's not the greatest, but it'll help you out with how to sew some of those on. We start by cutting our fabric 1.5 inches wide. So I've made sure that my sides lined up right here. And I'm going to find 1.5 inches on my ruler. So my ruler has this really cool 1/2 inch side right here and 1 inch. So 1.5 inches. I'm going to line that up along the straight edge, and I'm going to cut. When I'm cutting, I'm making sure to keep my hand away from the edge because these rotary blades are very sharp. Don't ask my finger how I know that. I'm going to cut another strip. And there we have 2 strips. Fold it out here to measure it out. So we need strips that are about 16 inches in length. So this is the 36 end. 10 would be 20, 26, 27, 28, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 20 would be at 16. And these don't have to be super accurate cuts at the end. If you want a super accurate cut, you could use your ruler to line up the top line here. Make sure it's a 90-degree cut. At about 20. And slice. Now I have these 2 strips. So you can either do 2 separate strips that are already the correct length. The other thing I like to do is I like to make one long strip because then the folding process doesn't take quite as long. When you do that, you take these 2 strips and you would line them up at 90-degree angles, right sides together, so that they're perpendicular. And you would sew across here at the bias. Here we are at the sewing machine, and I've gone ahead and drawn the line I'm going to sew. I don't usually do that step. I'll show you. I don't usually do that step. If it's just one strip, I can usually kind of eyeball it, especially with how skinny these strips are, but it's not a bad idea, especially if you're not used to doing this. So what I have done is I've drawn from this corner over to where this corner would meet down here. And then I scoot it over and line it up. I'm going to sew right along that line. And the next step is to trim 1/4 inch away from that. So let's turn you around and we'll trim it up. So I'm going to take my ruler, line up the 1/4 inch right there on the seam. Right there on the sewed seam. I don't know if you can really see that. Let's see if I can get in there. Yeah, it's not going to really show up, but I'm lining it up right there on that line that I sewed. And I'm going to trim it. Sewing it like this keeps it from getting too bulky because, as you see when I fold it over, that seam is now diagonal. So when you fold it, the bulk isn't all in one spot. The bulk is spread out on the fold there. So let's take this over to the iron and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I have a couple different ways of doing this. I have a really cool little bias tape tool, so I'll show you how to do that if you have one of these, but I'll also show you how to do it without a fancy tool. So let's do first the longer way. without the fancy tool. So here are my individual strips, the not sewed together ones. I always make sure that my iron is hot and ready to go. I like to fold it in half first so I know where that half line is. Let me put a piece of fabric underneath. You guys are probably having a hard time seeing this on my ironing board since it's teal colored fabric. Okay, here we go. This will be better to see. So I folded it, that way we have a flat surface. I ironed it just in half all the way down so I know where that half marker is. Now I'm going to open it up and I'm going to fold each side into that half mark. Okay, so that's straight down the line, getting it as close to half as I can. Make sure you get your fingers out of the way at the end. Your iron is probably very hot. I'm going to do the same for this side. Folding it over. It's very hot. Okay, and there's our double fold. And then we just fold it in half on top of itself to make one little skinny strip, just like so. Okay, so that's one strip ironed. Now you'll see all of those rough edges are tucked inside, all those raw edges are tucked inside except these ones at the end, so I'll show you how we take care of that in just a moment. If you have one of these cool bias tape folders, what you do is you stick one end in and you push it through. I have this tiny little screwdriver. You could use a pin. Pull it out here. And now this will do all the folding for you, so you only need to run the iron over it one time. I'm going to start here and just go down the whole strip. If you look on Pinterest, there are or other places, there are plenty of ways to make something that folds like this for you just out of cardboard or anything else, so you can feel free to take a look around. But now it's done my 2 folds for me, so all I have to do is fold it in half one more time over itself. And there we have it, 2 little strips. Now, if you have this long strip like we had before, the first thing you're going to have to do is press it where your seam is. So I like to lay it flat with my wrong side on top, flip it, and use my iron to press it. That'll press it nice and flat for you. Then you do the same thing, the same folding, or tucking it into one of these things. So one thing we have to do is we have to finish sewing this together so it's ready to go on a mask. So this is our folded bias tape. You can leave one end raw, okay, one end with this exposed edges because we're going to tuck that into the mask anyway, but we're going to have to finish one edge. So I like to do quite a few of these strips first, all 16 inches. If you have one long strip, I suggest cutting it into 16-inch strips before sewing them down. That way you can finish the edges. So I'm just going to put my foot down here and I'm going to get sewing away. Okay, I'm nearing the end of my strip. As I near the end, I'm going to fold over the bottom. So I'll zoom in a little bit. I folded over the bottom. That way I'm catching a little bit inside. Sorry about that, I almost dropped you. All right, and I'm gonna fold it back in, and now we won't have the raw edges sticking out at the end. I hit my reverse and I go over it, that way it is intact. Now you can cut this if you like, or you can chain stitch these. I like to chain stitch them. That means one after the other. Makes the process go a little faster. So I'm just going to start the next one. I'm going to keep going all the way down. Now that I'm getting close to the edge, I'm going to tuck it in. If you're going to lift your presser foot like I just did, you probably want to make sure you're in needle down position. My machine is set to automatically do needle down, unless I tell it otherwise. And I'm going to keep going, reaching the end, back it up a little bit, and go right back over it. Now that I'm at the end, I just have 2 pieces to sew for you right now. I'm going to cut my thread right here in between. I'm going to snip close to that finished edge on this side. That way I don't have to trim that up later. That's a little hack that I have. Okay, how to add these to the mask. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have found my unfinished sides, because I want those tucked in. I do not want those sticking out. These are the finished edges where it's folded in. Those are the sides that are going to stick out. Here is a mask. Has string all over it from my room. Here is mask with the edges all ready to go. So I did everything up until folding and pressing this part. So I did the pocket, I did all the top stitching and all of that. So now I just need to finish, I basically just need to finish the front. So I'm going to have this so that the front of the mask is facing up. My raw edge right here of my strip to add on. And I'm going to put it about a 1/4 inch or so in. Not super far in, but I don't want it right next to the edge either, because I'm going to have to back up and sew over it. And I'm just going to go about a 1/4 inch or so away from the edge with my presser foot. And here we go. I like to go over those ties because they're going to be pulled on a lot, so I like to make sure that they're sewed down very well. So you'll see me every single time I go over one of these strips, I go in reverse and then I come back over it to make sure it's really tied down. I'm going to lay this one down so I don't forget to do that. Again, finding the raw edge, lining it up with the other raw edge, roughly a 1/4 inch away from the finished edge down at the bottom. Back it up and go over it again. Now we're going to take this to the iron. All right, I'm going to lay this with my inside facing up, and I'm going to pull a little bit on these ties so that it folds over what we just sewed. So if I hold it like this, you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to pull so that you are folding in on what was just sewed. And I'm going to press that with my iron. That way I know it's flat. Now I'm going to just roll that over, and I'm going to fold it up to about where my pocket is, and that should give me at least a 1/4 inch there. Usually it gives a little bit more, but that's okay because I want to make sure that I catch the raw edge underneath of my fabric ties, as well as giving enough space to sew down these ties on the top. Right here, if you want, you could pin Since I'm only doing one side, I'm not going to worry about pinning it down right now. Usually I pin, turn, and fold and iron the other side. So let's go back to the sewing machine. We'll finish this up. Alright, I like to sew this down in two different places. So I'm going to essentially top stitch right here where we folded, close to the pocket, making sure I don't catch the pocket because that would close it up. Here I am going over that first tie, so I'm going to go back and over the top again. I'm going to go all the way down. I'm going to catch this tie down here. Reverse. And back again. Now I'm going to come and I'm going to do the same thing but on the far edge over here. Alright, now we're going to do this other side of top stitching. So I'm going to line up the edge there. And I'm going to go. Here we go. Back over that tie and forward again, all the way down to the edge and back, and there we have it. That's how you're attaching the ties. You just need to do that for both sides. And then I trim up all of my loose strings here. Alrighty, there you go. So I would just need to do the same process on this side. Next I'm going to show you how to do bias tape on the pleated masks. There's a couple different ways to do it. I'm going to show you one way that you do after the whole mask itself is done, instead of doing... Alright, I'm back, and here's a pleated mask. And I have some double fold bias tape. This stuff happens to be the pre-made stuff that I've got at the store, but same idea. Two pieces folded into the middle, then folded across and ironed. I'm gonna find, so what I did was I made one long piece that is 32 inches plus whatever this width is, which happens to be about 3 to 4 inches. So, so 36 inches is probably plenty if you have a yard of fabric cutting it the longer way. 36 inches would be plenty for this. I'm going to fold it in half to find the middle point, and I'm going to put that in the middle of my mask here. That's roughly the middle, and I'm going to put this into the middle of my bias tape. Okay, so then I'm going to pin that so I don't lose that spot. I have 2 pins, I only need 1. That way this doesn't move on me later, because that's the important piece, is that that is close to the middle. Okay, since these are both going to be finished edges this time, I'm going to start by folding my piece. I'm going to show you again how I did that. I'm going to just fold it over and tuck it in. And I'm going to start a little bit onto the tape, since it's going to be a little thicker with that folded edge. A couple stitches forward, stitch backward, and forward again, and here we go. We're off to the races. Sewing all the way down the line. I'm going to take my pin out now so that I don't forget to do that later. I'm going to go a little slower as we go over the mask, just to make sure that I don't break my needle. And back to the races again. Here we go. And we're coming to the other end, so I'm going to fold it and tuck. And I'm going to hit my reverse button, and again. And there we have it. We have our bias tape onto the mask. I find this, for me, is a little faster and easier than trying to tuck it in before I flip the mask. So it's really up to you. You can do it either way. But there you have it. Then you would just need to do the other side.